so much for joining us today. I'm Alex Holder. I'm part of Daily Design Stories here. Really excited to get into lots of questions about both industry and academia, which are two worlds you can sit at the intersection of in a really interesting way.
So my name is Francine Gemperle. I'm an alumni of Carnegie Mellon, which is how I'm connected to the team here on the podcast. I'm also an adjunct instructor at Carnegie Mellon in the Integrated Innovation Institute, where I work with students who are in graduate school and have a background in marketing, design, business, or engineering, and are coming into our program to learn about innovation and innovation in the context of an interdisciplinary product development situation. So that is what I do in my free time. I also have a full-time role as a design principal at a robotics company called Seegrid. And what we do is automate material flow in indoor situations. So think factories and warehouses where material has to move around. So we automate the long haul heavy loads that are incredibly boring deliveries that need to be made inside the buildings so that the people can be working on the more complex and interesting tasks. So the important thing about like the mythology of hiring and applying for jobs when you're a grad student is that businesses and companies do not organize around grad students' graduation dates. We know about it for sure, but usually when a company is growing and has needs, that's when you'll see a lot of job postings go out. And when they don't, there will be fewer job postings. And those cycles happen throughout the year. It's really great when you can plan and time things so that you're hiring in the winter for new graduates that are going to come to you at the start of the summer. But that is not a frequent situation, especially for smaller organizations. So if I'm a hiring manager and I have a need now, I'm looking for people who can start in the first week of January, right?
Yeah.
So if you are wonderful and you apply, and then when it gets into the details, I find out that you're not available till September, that's going to be frustrating for me. So whenever you do decide to apply, make it like completely evident when you're going to be available to work, because that's probably going to be a filter. Now, maybe I know about something that's going to have to start up in September that I'm hiring for. So I really do want to be looking now for people at the end of next year. Although right now it's November of 2022. I would say it's highly unusual that anybody in any business knows exactly what their needs are going to be in September of 2023. You think about how businesses work, they all have some kind of a fiscal calendar that they orient to. And typically budgets, including hiring budgets, are tied to that calendar. That calendar probably either starts in June or January. So at this time of year, you would be like solidifying your January budget for next year. Once that's all solidified, approved, whoever it has to go through, then typically January, February, March is when you would start to see those job postings appear.
Yeah, that's extremely helpful. And I appreciate the caveat there. A smaller business does differ from like somebody like Google, for instance, who's hiring a year out.
Yeah.
Figma I know is another one we chatted with. They're hiring a year out right now. So that's extremely helpful. Okay, so that's useful. I'm going to sprinkle those little like job anxiety questions throughout our conversation, but I'm excited to also dive into the autonomous vehicle industry and robotics more broadly. Another caveat here, I am by no means an expert in any of this. I'm just a designer sitting on the outside saying, that looks really cool what they're doing in there. And then all the questions will follow. I'll start you off with a kind of a big question here, which is, what do you think a realistic vision is for autonomous vehicles? And feel free to get into 5 years out, 10 years, 30, pick your numbers, but what do you envision here?
Yeah, so the designer's role in envisioning the future is really focused on what are the experiences that we can create for people? What is the value of those experiences? And could we build a business model around those experiences? So in terms of some of the tactical stuff, like if you want to know how soon will self-driving cars be viable on the streets, I can't answer that. That's the technical piece. That's the engineering work that needs to be done. And there's a lot of people who are experts in that technical work who are talking about it, right? That industry is full of people who are sharing fairly publicly their critiques of how it's coming together, the challenges. So I think you guys can find all that stuff on the internet.
Yeah, definitely.
From the standpoint of design and UX research work, it's really about understanding like what could that technology afford us if we had autonomous vehicles. So if we think about the company that I work for, what I just mentioned, right? The opportunity of an autonomous vehicle is about an efficiency in operations. So when you have material flow in an indoor environment, what you're looking for is consistency and efficiency of flow. You're throughputting material in one door and out the other. So think about raw materials come in one side, they get warehoused, they get manufactured into something, and products come out the other side. So if you take that as a black box and look at all the things that slow down material flow and all the things that increase material flow, there's some real opportunities for autonomous vehicles, right? Autonomous vehicles show up for work all the time, every time, never get sick, right? That's a huge bonus. They are incredibly predictable. So for things that are predictable, they're a good fit. And that predictability and consistency leads to safety. So those are three things that could affect your material flow if you didn't have automation, right? People can be unpredictable. We get sick, right? We might not make it to work. We might get COVID. There's all kinds of stuff going on. But we also, in our unpredictability, are really good at dealing with uncertainty. And autonomous systems are challenged by uncertainty. So we're looking at what is the opportunity that an autonomous system provides us with and balances against all of the other factors affecting it from a business standpoint and a human experience standpoint.
Yeah, there's so much to dig into there. I think one thing that your comment made me think about was I've been reading about human in the loop technology when it comes to automation. How can we, in the case when a human needs to take over, if something catastrophic is about to happen, keep them alert enough to where they will notice when something's gone awry. So is that any part of your work? Do you have any experience of thinking about human in the loop?
It is, although there's a lot of different ways that human in the loop is taken in industry. You might read or hear about systems that are intended to be autonomous until there's a problem, and then a remote operator can come in and solve it. Seegrid systems are intended to operate in a hybrid environment. So these are environments with both humans and robots working together to achieve shared goals. And so a human being in the loop is part of the operations. It's not like a separate situation or crisis avoidance or crisis management. It's just like standard operations that humans are partnering with robots.
And this may be a nonsense question, so let me know, but is that more due to technical limitations at this point, or is it because you want the humans to be able to handle those ambiguous situations that
you want the humans? Yeah, you really want the humans in there. So there's a lot of situations when you really need humans, and a lot of manufacturing and warehousing has been set up for humans. So the places that are doing what's called like a lights out facility where it's all robots and no humans, those are brand new facilities. Most places are facilities that are 30 to 100 years old. And so those facilities have been designed and the operations designed for human and human plus automation operations.
Cost balance there. So a company has the option to, let's say, build a new warehouse and have it fully, I believe you call it blackout, like where it's fully
lights out.
Lights out, fully lights out. And obviously I would imagine some cost savings there from not having as many employees and it's just the robotics going versus let's just keep the facilities we have. We'll keep paying all these employees to work hand in hand with the robots. Is there a trend there? Or can you identify any patterns?
I couldn't. And I think there's like a whole professional discipline of industrial engineering and material flow automation that just focuses on this stuff. So my work is designing the experiences for the people who robots. Right. So I'm not an industrial automation engineer. And I think like that those cost trade-offs, like that is the work of the business analysts for every situation everywhere, is to figure that stuff out.
So we talked about the business analyst, and there's a whole kind of future of work and philosophical angle too. What is a meaningful role as you design these experiences for humans? How much do you feel like your work designing these experiences takes into consideration like meaningful work for humans on a day-to-day basis?
So it's important to understand that a lot of the design work that goes into developing autonomous systems is designing the tools that humans use. Like it is the tooling for the automation that the human engineers are using that needs to be designed and envisioned.
Yeah, so a lot of human factors, kind of principles wrapped up in that, I would imagine.
It's similar to, you mentioned earlier in this call, the tool Figma, right?
Sure.
Figma is a tool for designers to use to get stuff done. The tools that automation designers use are not publicly available. Most companies that have automation have developed their own tools. They have in-house tools for their systems. And that is what is being designed.
Understood. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. So I'm going to dig through, and I've got a couple other questions here that we want to roll through. So one question I've got is, what is the biggest non-technical hurdle that the widespread implementation of autonomous vehicles faces right now?
It's people and money. Like when you think about technical hurdles and non-technical hurdles, all technical hurdles come back to, is the money available to pay the people to deal with this technical complexity? Is there a viable business model within this space that will allow us to make the revenue that makes it make sense that we've put all these engineers on this problem?
I think that kind of goes hand in hand with another question I had, which is unfortunately we saw Argo AI shut down somewhat recently. And I asked, is that kind of a harbinger of things to come for this industry, or is it more just coming back to that revenue issue that you talked about?
Yeah, so I think right now lots of companies are going through layoffs, and layoffs or shutting down a business is more of an indicator of a financial health of an organization. Could we make a viable business out of what we are doing fast enough with the investment that we had up front? And that, I think, is more of an issue around just like managing money and tackling the right problems than anything else. I don't think the position that, I think, was it Ford and VW, who were the major investors, they had to take a business position on the whole thing. And they took a business position when they put in the initial investment. And then this year they had to take another business position on the whole thing, make a decision.
Gotcha. Yeah, for sure. That definitely makes sense. I think a lot of these questions are job anxiety, and the next one is no different, which is, I think we've discussed before, gathering domain expertise. As new designers, they tend to hear, oh, you need to specialize. Maybe autonomous vehicles is one area, maybe AI. And I think you were pushing back on that a little bit, this idea of gaining domain expertise for designers. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so in my career, I worked for 8 years in academia and then 12 years in a design consulting firm. And then the past 5 years in tech startups around autonomous vehicles. And the thing that is pervasive throughout my whole career is that designers need to be good at becoming experts in new domains, regardless of whether you're committed to working for one business for several years or you're picking up consulting projects on a quarterly basis. You need to have a skill and continually flex that muscle that lets you develop expertise quickly. A friend of mine always called it, we're experts at becoming experts. So it's having tools in your toolkit to understand a new domain, understand the information space, who the users are, what their needs are, in short order so that you can move quickly into design work and continually learn as you go. I don't think there is an advantage that you have if you commit to one industry and stick with it, at least not in the early years. The people who have domain expertise because they've stuck with some particular domain for a long time, those are people who have decades-long careers in one industry.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Thank you for that answer. So let's think more about the design skills that you take with you and less about the domain. Do you consider yourself to be like a T-shaped designer? And H, where do you feel like your strong suit is in the design thinking process?
Yeah, I don't know what the letter shape is.
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe it's W. And let me expand on that. A lot of my work is taking big strategic visions that organizations have and making them tangible and actionable so that the teams who are working in the weeds can build and deliver. And typically what happens is those big strategic visions are way too big. If you've worked in agile sprints, you can't take a big strategic long-term vision and turn it into a sprint's worth of work. You have to be strategically slicing it up and identifying, okay, what are we going to build first? And then you revisit that vision, and then you move back into the tactics, and then you revisit that vision. So that W comes from that movement back and forth and being like the shepherd or the chaperone for that movement back and forth. Because it's not me by myself, right? It's me building this connection between these big picture business visions and the teams of designers and engineers who are going to do the execution work.
I love that. So the W, that's a new one I haven't heard yet. I'm going to add that to the W, the T, or the H. That's
Well,
really
we started with the alphabet stuff. What is the
yeah,
T?
for sure.
The T one comes from I have depth in one area
Right.
and breadth.
Depth and breadth, and then H is less foundation across, but maybe a medium level foundation, if that makes sense. And then 2 deep areas of expertise. So
2 deep ones. I see.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Or-
feel that would be a fun party game for you guys.
Right.
Next time you're at the bar, come up with a description for every letter of the alphabet and how it's a metaphor for your skills.
I like it. I can picture the Figma project already. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Cool. I really think this design kind of advice and the Q&A is super helpful. So I'm going to continue in this vein. So let's say we built a time machine. You're going back to when you first started as a designer, and you're giving yourself some career advice based on everything you know now. So what would be some really pithy things you would tell yourself?
Yeah. So this amazing professor that I worked for early in my career, Dan Sawarik, who only recently retired from CMU, he said, you have to change what you're doing every 10 years. And I took note of that. Oh, yeah, every 10 years I'll change what I'm doing. I'm of a generation where my parents worked in the same jobs forever.
Yeah.
My mother's been in the same job for 50 years, right? So to hear from a mentor, change your job every 10, I was like, oh, yeah, that perfect sense. The advice he didn't give me that I needed, that I would give myself now, is to trust your instincts about when it's time to move on and which direction to head. So when you stay at a company 5, 6, 7 years, you get really good. You gain a lot of expertise in how to do that. And so where does that instinct come from that tells you, okay, you need to move to the next thing? And trusting that instinct opens you up to, it's hard for you guys to imagine now because you are like swimming in this vulnerability, right? But when you've been at a business and in a job for 5 or 6 years, you're good at it. Everybody knows you. You know everybody. The salaries continue to increase. The titles have gone up. Like it is a really safe space. So making those changes is actually really hard because you revisit the vulnerability of second semester of grad school. What do I want to do with my life? Does anyone care? Am I good enough? Will anyone hire me? Right? All that stuff.
Yeah. Yep. You nailed it. You nailed it. And so 10 years. So how fine grained are we talking? Because it sounds like the way he meant it was more change a job, but from our conversation, it sounds like you've gone beyond the job and kind of changed fundamentally the thing you're trying to tackle. Is that fair?
That is fair, and that is very intentional. So that professor that I worked for, he was at Carnegie Mellon his whole career after he finished his PhD, but he moved to different departments in different colleges. And in some cases started up new things. And so that was a really powerful thing that he was able to do. So even though his professional training was the same, it was like, oh, is human computer interaction a thing? Yeah, it's a thing. Let's make an institute.
Yeah.
But for me, so I did an undergrad in industrial design. And at that time in design school, the hot question, when I was where you guys are now, the hot question was, do you want to be in academia? Do you want to be an in-house designer? Or do you want to be in consulting? And to me, I was like, well, why not do all three? So that is effectively how I have shaped my career, is all of the opportunities available to designers are like a grand buffet of interesting things. So when I changed pretty completely.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's impressive though, and that is one thing that's quite unique about you, as I would say, as someone straddling both industry and academia. What do you feel that you get out of each of those, and what makes you decide to do them both together? Because you mentioned free time at some point, but it doesn't sound like you have free time in the traditional sense with all that going on.
Yeah, so I had been at the university for the first 8 years of my career. Then I was in consulting. And then after being in consulting for maybe 8 or 10 years, I had the opportunity to come back and adjunct teach at the Institute. And on a complete whim, I said yes. And what I've found is that Carnegie Mellon grad students are like professional development for me. You guys challenge me in ways that my colleagues at work don't. They never would. And maybe because it would be inappropriate and rude, right?
Yeah.
But it's like CMU students are so driven, so curious, often very interested in the debate and the argument. They're inquisitive beyond belief. And so being in front of a classroom gets me that challenge that all of those students are going to bring into the class discussion. It also gets me like professional speaking experience. It forces me to hone my presentation skills. How concise and clear can I be with the ideas of my professional discipline? And at work, I'm not challenged in that way. Work, though, offers me something else. So at Seegrid right now, I get to go really deep on a really interesting, complex problem space with a team of some of the greatest engineers I've ever worked with. And we go deep, we work on these long-term problems, and we're launching new things into the world based on that work. Academia could never offer me. So it's two very different things I get from these two different jobs.
I love that. Yeah, the attitude of why not all three? Why can't I have everything? It's interesting.
It would be hard to do all three at once. Like I 100% can't take on any consulting work. And during the semester when I'm teaching in person, it's a stretch, right? It's only a 7-week mini.
Sure.
But it's an extra 20 hours a week of work, which is, you guys know. And if you don't know, you're about to in Capstone.
Yeah.
Working 60 hours a week is exhausting.
I know. I think I'm at 66. Tejas and Anna might be at 69. So we're, and we keep stacking additional things for fun like this. So it's great. Okay. Reflecting back on your career, can you, if you're comfortable sharing, can you talk a little bit about maybe a low point and what you did to overcome that low point? And then on the other hand, a high point to complement that?
Yeah. I think it's a tough question. I think the high points in my career are always solving architectural problems, and they're rare, but they are some of my favorite kind of work. And when I can do it well and in partnership with my engineering team, and it brings value to the organization, that is always my favorite.
Yeah. Can you elaborate that on just a bit of like an example of an architectural problem you faced?
Sure. Often in complex systems that have evolved over time, there has not been an intentional way of architecting information inside the system. And I saw these problems emerge quite a bit when I was in consulting, and it was typically with companies who never meant to be in the software business, right? We were in the appliance business. We were in the film business. We were in the healthcare business or health insurance business. And all of a sudden, we have to have a high quality, world class, sometimes governed by federal regulations, piece of software. But what we have is we've built this system gradually over time, but we never had the initial intent that we were a software company. So the opportunity arises to say, oh, pause a second. What is this information space that we are trying to make digital? And so that's when we do information architecture work and creating a model. It's an abstraction that can be shared across multiple different teams as a point of reference for how information entities are connected to each other inside the system. And all the different teams are going to use it in different ways, but it creates this like organizing function for all the humans who have to contribute to the system, because the system has reached a scale and complexity that it's not one team. Like the number of people working on it is larger than the number who can be on a Zoom call or in a room together.
Oh yeah.
So you need to like have some abstract model that everyone is referencing to keep you all heading in the same direction.
I'm getting a bit of flashbacks. My last client was a state government agency that one third of the state relied on for benefits.
Yes.
And they had decades of, we asked, okay, is there reference documents that we got to build it.
No, and in that kind of situation, a government agency would have never had or had gone a long time without having in-house software engineering. When there was work to be done and budget for it, they would hire it out, which means they might hire it out to a different team at a different company every time, which means not only is there no documentation, if you were going to go and you're calling on multiple different organizations for whom the staff may or may not still be there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The people that maintain the code base have all retired, and there's one guy that's been here 30 years. God forbid he gets hit by a bus and the organization would go under.
Yeah.
Truly amazing. But I resonate with that because it is very impactful and rewarding when you can build something for those people and they can get back to doing the reason they initially got in that field. If it's helping people, for example, okay, now I can help people and not just deal with this arcane system that takes up half my time. So really powerful stuff. That's awesome. On the other end of the spectrum, are there any lessons maybe that you've learned from low points in the career that you can help us with? Should we face them?
Yeah, it's a hard one because you're always going to have horrible days at work or weeks where you're like, what? Yeah. But I feel like you'll always get through those. I can tell you, I was laid off at the start of the pandemic, and that was not the worst thing that ever happened. But if you had asked me in 2019 what the worst thing would be, I would have thought it was getting laid off. But the reality is that getting laid off is just another thing that you sign up for when you sign up to work in advanced tech and tech startups. Right? That's part of a thing that happens, and it's fine. Like it works out fine. If you're good at what you do and you're attentive to your career, you will find your way.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know. I feel like the other low point really, I had a stress headache for 9 months that was excruciating. Oh, and they were pretty sure I had a brain tumor. And ultimately, when it came to be that it was pretty eye-opening. Yeah. That stress could get so out of hand as to be debilitating and being on the brink of a medical crisis. Yeah. And so I would say the lesson from that low point for me to you guys is to manage your self-care. Yep. Manage your stress, like tune into when you are too stressed. And figure out whatever it is that you need to do. If it's petting that dog or going for a walk or whatever it is, just figure out and take care of it.
Yeah, that's definitely prescient advice right now. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really good advice, actually. Can you talk about, speaking of relaxing, what are some things that you do outside of work, outside of academia, that help you recharge your creative battery?
Yeah, so I am a parent. I have 2 teenagers. As much or as little as they appreciate that, I am like really interested and invested in their lives.
Yeah. That's awesome. I wouldn't have thought two teenagers would have been the answer to relaxation, but good on you.
It is. They're amazing.
Yeah, definitely. The opportunities seem to keep growing. So I'm sure that's been cool for you to witness that change, over the 20 years that you've been here.
Yeah, I will say that when I first finished undergrad, the real reason I stayed was because I had a job here. In my class of 40 some industrial designers, only a couple of us had jobs. There was a recession going on.
Yeah.
There weren't a lot of jobs for brand new designers coming out of under, but that was a few years. And it was after that first job after school when I actually committed to this place to stay here. So you can always like finish school and stick around for a little while.
So thank you so much for all your insights tonight. I think I've taken enough of your time. Hopefully we get to do this again soon. Francine, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Good luck with everything.